Well, good morning, everybody, and let me start by addressing the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Just get right in here. Just get right in. You're supposed to get right here. Yeah. Just get right. Oh, there you go.
First and foremost, my prayers are with Charlie and his family, with his wife Erica and their two children. Like so many, I experienced this impact through the eyes of my daughter. He showed her that the impact that she could have as a young person, as a young conservative person, that was really important to her. Charlie's legacy will live on in every young person that he inspired. Now, turning to the work of the House Republicans, over the last 8 months, we've remained focused on delivering results for working families. Nowhere has that been bigger than in the working families tax cuts. These are the most pro-growth, most pro-family, pro-middle class tax cuts in history, particularly when it comes to growing rural health care, manufacturing and small businesses, energy dominance, and take-home pay. When it comes to growing rural health care, the tax cut bill invests $50 billion. This single largest investment in rural health care history. The administration moved quickly on this investment, and just yesterday, Dr. Oz announced HHS already had the portal ready for folks to begin applying for those rural health care funds. The legislation also grows small businesses and manufacturing. We incentivized Made in America goods, eliminated taxes on overtime, made it more affordable to own a small business in this country. These are points that I discussed at length with constituents in Congressman Kagan's district just last week. The bill grows American energy production as well, cutting red tape and gas prices, a topic that we covered during Friday's visit to a 7-Eleven gas station with Congressman Rob Whitman in Virginia. And finally, and probably the most important, is this bill grows take-home pays for the average American by $10,000. In part, that's done by eliminating taxes on tips, which were highlighted while at a local restaurant in Congressman McGuire's district while on the Working Families Tax Cut Tour. It is the workers in real America, the folks who build our ships and accept our tips, that working families tax cuts are designed for their prosperity and for their growth. And with that, I want to turn it over to Congressman Tony Weed, who's a small business owner himself. Tony, thank you for joining us today.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to begin by thanking Speaker Johnson, Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer, and Chairwoman McLean for inviting me to speak here today about the major small business wins in our working families tax cuts. Prior to running for Congress, my wife and I ran our gas station convenience store business for nearly 3 decades in Northeast Wisconsin. During my time in business, I learned firsthand how difficult it is to deal with overbearing government regulations and tax codes that cause financial hardship, stagnate growth, and make it very difficult to be successful. Under Joe Biden's administration, small businesses were crushed with an unprecedented surge in federal regulations and the highest inflation that we have seen in 40 years that made it harder for small businesses to turn a profit. My wife and I sold our business in 2022, and we faced these issues like every other small business in this country. Thankfully, with the leadership of President Trump and House Republicans, the working families tax cuts will finally give small businesses across Wisconsin's 8th District the relief they deserve. One of the most important victories is making the 199A deduction permanent. In Wisconsin alone, more than 85,000 employers will benefit. This tax cut allows dairy producers and other small businesses in my district to reinvest in their operations, facilities, and in their workforce. Nearly 3/4 of people claiming the 199A deduction in 2022 had an adjusted gross income of less than $200,000. Simply put, this tax cut is for Main Street, not Wall Street. This is not to mention permanent R&D tax relief, elimination of the death tax, increased employer child care credit, and so much more. All of these things are real, tangible wins that will greatly impact small businesses in Wisconsin's 8th District. You know, I've met with dozens of small business owners in my district, and I can tell you they're extremely excited about this bill and the work that House Republicans are continuing to do for them. Despite constant fear-mongering from Democrats, which has been echoed by the mainstream media, the Working Families Tax Cut is a major win for small business owners and puts Main Street over Wall Street once and for all. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce Kevin Kester, a fifth-generation California rancher from Monterey County, where his family has lived and worked for over 100 years. Kevin is a very active within the industry, having served as president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, California Cattlemen's Association, and San Luis Obispo County Cattlemen's Association.
Yeah. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and your leadership team. I want to thank President Trump. I cannot overstate how important it was for this one big, beautiful bill to get passed and signed by the President. With our family ranching operation, I had to suffer 30 years ago when my grandfather passed away. We had to pay a death tax to the federal government. It took us years and years to overcome that hurdle and not have to sell our family ranch. My family, we couldn't hire enough people like we should. We couldn't invest back in the community or our operation. So the increase in permanence of the state tax exemptions, the death tax, hugely important for us, number one. Other provisions, it's already been mentioned, 179A, the 100% bonus depreciation made permanent. That is a big deal for our family ranching operation to expense those things. 199A is also pass-through deduction helps. There's also some other provisions that don't get talked about as much, and that's some of the Farm Bill provisions, the funding of conservation programs, that really helps keep our ranch viable. It's good for the environment, it's good for ranchers, and it's good for the taxpayers to keep our ranches healthy and productive. So again, I want to thank the leader and the leadership team, the House, President Trump, for getting this bill passed. It'll help keep my kids and my grandkids ranching and feeding America and the world. Thank you.
You better get out front. You're like hiding back here. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tony, and thanks to all your colleagues who came today. Last week, the world watched in horror as a political assassination was carried out against a champion of free speech, Charlie Kirk. As Lisa said when we started, our prayers continue to be with his wife, Erica, and their two young children as they endure this unimaginable loss. In response to Charlie's death, tens of thousands have gathered for vigils to mourn, pray, and remember. These vigils organically sprung up across the world, not fueled by hate, vitriol, or revenge, but by unity, love, and hope. I want you to see the contrast between this response to tragedy and responses we have seen in the past. For instance, in my state, in 2020, Minneapolis was burned by rioters while Tim Walz's wife kept the windows of the governor's mansion open to, quote, smell the burning tires. While radical leftists react with chaos and destruction, may we continue to respond with prayer, community, and effective policy. Policy that promotes law and order in a time when Democrats seem to be set on promoting crime and chaos. Since day one, President Trump has made it clear that safety and security are possible if leaders have the will to do it. The president's decisive action in the District of Columbia has resulted in over 2,400 arrests and over 200 illegal firearms seized. Thanks to his efforts, our nation's capital is now safe for residents and visitors alike. This week, House Republicans are going to take action to solidify the president's crime crackdown here in the district with legislation that ensures criminals are kept off the streets and that their crimes receive appropriate sentences. With these bills, Republicans are empowering the city's law enforcement officers, fighting back against rampant juvenile crime, and making the district courts accountable again. The American people are fed up with the out-of-control crime, and our capital city should serve as a blueprint for law and order across the country. By setting the example here, President Trump and House Republicans are delivering on the promise to make America safe again. With that, the leader of this, our majority leader.
Thank you, Whip. We still mourn the loss of Charlie Kirk. And for anybody that watched Friday night when his widow, Erica, spoke so powerfully about Charlie's impact, of course, on her and her family first, but on the country, and now as we've seen on the world, it just reminds us how powerful the idea of one person's idea can be, because that's what Charlie represented when he started Turning Point at 18 years old. It was an idea, and that idea became a movement. And anybody who thought they were going to snuff out that movement with an assassin's bullet, they were clearly underestimating the power of Charlie's idea and the inspiration that he has now given to millions and millions of people all across this country. And in that momentum, that inspiration is only going to grow. But his assassination also gives us a moment to reflect about how we can all do better, how we can try to stop this unfortunately too common cycle that we're seeing. And as we reflect, we all need to look at ourselves and, are the things we're saying, can we do better there? But I do think it's an important moment for the media as well, because when you look at just this example with Charlie, and there have been some studies that have been done that have taken, just for example, President Trump and the word fascism. One network alone used that combination of words over 3,000 times. 3,000 times, mainstreaming that combination of words in just the last 3 years. And whether some realize it or not, that magnification is heard by the wrong person. And we've seen people, deranged people, take action, think that that's a call to take action. In the case of Charlie, he was called those things too. And there are leaders up here that throw that word around about anybody that they disagree with. And if it's amplified in the media and the wrong deranged person hears it and decides to take action, in the case of Charlie's assassin, he wrote the word fascist on the bullet. And it's just an example that we can all do better. And we can all do our part to not allow that kind of hateful speech to become mainstream, and stand up against it so that we don't see this become the norm in America. It's not who America is. We are not a nation that settles our differences with violence. We settle our political differences at the ballot box, and that's the way it always has to be for a free and fair democratic society to endure. And we will endure, and Charlie's legacy will endure, but it's only going to endure when we all resolve to do better. I want to talk about this week. Obviously, we have a very busy week. We are dealing more with DC crime. The oversight committees passed out a number of bills. We're taking some of those bills this week and moving them on the House floor. These are bills we work very closely with President Trump to bring. He's done a lot on his own to make DC safer. You can see the numbers. Thousands of criminals arrested. 7 young people that were lost that are now found. So many people around here that feel safer because of the actions that were taken. But there's still ordinances on the books that make it hard for the hardened criminals to get arrested, and even if they're arrested, to get put in jail and be held accountable for their crimes. And we're bringing bills to address that this week. We're also bringing some more good energy security bills to the floor so that America can continue to be the dominant energy nation in the world. It's great for families when they pay lower gas prices. It creates jobs. It helps all of our friends around the world. It takes away the leverage from countries like Russia, who make billions of dollars a month selling their energy on world markets. If we can produce more here, we're going to continue advancing that here on the House floor this week. And then, of course, we're going to resolve, hopefully at least for a short period of time, the impasse on government funding, and I'm sure the Speaker is going to talk a lot more about that. So another busy week, but we keep Charlie Kirk and his family in our prayers and lift them up. Charlie had a strong faith in God, and that faith is what's going to get us all through times like this. The Speaker of the House.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. It has been a difficult week in America. We've addressed it many times at all the vigils around the country, that we have to acknowledge the emotion that's been involved. We live in unprecedented times in that, an assassination, an unspeakable crime, a murder like this is covered in real time online, where everyone, even young people, could see the images. And it's spurred on quite a mix of emotions around the country. It's shaken the nation, and I think everybody can recognize that. A combination of grief and sadness, people feeling just overwhelmed by that, the trauma of it, and then the anger that comes naturally in our human emotion from that, and even fear. I've described it as feeling very much like a dark shadow was cast across the country, and certainly even on Capitol Hill. And so you've had members and elected officials having lots of discussion about this and concern, and many have been unified by that. But I just wanted to point out, and I have every time I've spoken on this issue, that our friend Charlie, and he was a friend to so many of us, would not want us to be stuck in that grief. He would not want us to be overcome by despair. Instead, he would want everyone to go out and be happy warriors as he was, to honor his memory by doing what Charlie did, and that is encouraging the free exchange of ideas, the free marketplace of ideas, by preaching the truth, but doing that in a loving way, by loving others. And that's what Charlie was marked by. That's how he described himself, and that's what his actions prove, that he was a Christ follower. He followed the teachings of Jesus himself, and not a perfect man, because no one is. But Charlie lived out those principles as well as anybody that we know. And so the outpouring of support is unlike anything we've seen. And it's been mentioned, but after his passing, interest in Turning Point USA is literally off the charts. And by last count, I think there are over 32,000 inquiries of new chapters to be begun of Turning Point USA on college and high school campuses, university campuses around America. They already had, I think, roughly 3,500 of them. And now this organization will grow exponentially more, and his voice and his legacy will be heard far wider than even that they were before. We're so encouraged by the strength of his dear widow, Erica, and the children. We pray for them. The nation does. I joined vigils, I think 3 in the last few days. We had one Friday night in Baton Rouge at LSU before the first weekend, first home SEC football game for our alma mater down there. It was a standing room only event. We had all those college students show up, and it was so encouraging to me to see their attitude about it. While they were mourning, they were also encouraged to be emboldened and to go forward and to share what Charlie had taught so many of them. The line for our vigil at the Kennedy Center on Sunday night wrapped around the building multiple times. There's so much interest in this. And our bipartisan vigil here in the Capitol last night was a worthy tribute to a man who meant so much to so many in this building. But the tragedy has also initiated a number of uncomfortable but necessary conversations about important issues like the safety and security of our members and the responsibility of public servants, and the need for political leaders to turn down the temperature and the violent rhetoric in America. Not helpful. Government leaders, and this body in particular, have an increasing tendency to frame simple policy disputes as some sort of existential threat to our country, or as causes to, as some of them have said in their own words, take into the streets. That's not helpful. That is not productive, and it leads to bad consequences. Leaders cannot call their political opponents Nazis and fascists and enemies of the state because they disagree with their policy priorities. I mean, this is something we should have learned in grade school. This type of language spurs on depraved people, deranged people who take that as a cue. And this tragic phenomenon played out this week in Utah. Whether it's in politics, government, media, or business, people look to leaders for guidance, and we have to walk in the dignity of our office, as I say all the time. And when ostensibly serious representatives compare their ideological opponents to murderous dictators and evil people, some see that as a cue to act, and we have to stop that. The political violence has been decried, and it should be across the board. And we got to continue calling it out, and we will until it does. Let me talk about the issues on the floor this week. The DC crime bills has been referenced, and because we understand that solving this nationwide violent crime problem is critically important. It's a priority for President Trump as it is for congressional Republicans. So crime is something that touches everybody, and we all know somebody who's been carjacked or had a wallet stolen at gunpoint or was mugged, and it's happened to members of Congress in our nation's capital, and we have to stop it. Stopping violent crime is something that virtually every American agrees on. It's an 80-20 or 90-10 issue in this country. So this week, House Republicans are going to build on President Trump's wildly successful crackdown on crime here in the Capitol with 4 D.C.-specific bills that we believe can serve as a model for other municipalities around the country. Here they are very quickly. First, the D.C. Crimes Act. That would prohibit the left-wing D.C. Council from enacting lenient sentencing reforms and ensure juvenile offenders are charged as adults for serious crimes. Juvenile crime in D.C. is more than double the national average, or it was until the president stepped in here. The second bill is the D.C. Policing Protection Act, which restores law enforcement's ability to pursue fleeing suspects. It seems common sense, but it's been prohibited in some of these municipalities. We've all seen the hordes of ATVs and dirt bikes barreling through residential streets, and that's going to stop now. The third bill is the D.C. Juvenile Sentencing Reform Act. Reduces the age for juveniles to be tried as adults from 16 down to 14. Some of these crimes are so heinous that's necessary. And this is for certain violent offenses like murder, first-degree sex abuse, first-degree burglary, and armed robbery. The fourth bill is the D.C. Judicial Nominations Reform Act, which returns judicial appointments in D.C. to the President and the Senate in line with the Constitution. Left-wing activist judges are part of the problem, and they're not going to be allowed to return violent criminals to the streets anymore under the guise of restorative justice. We are restoring safety and order to the nation's capital, and we hope that other cities around the country follow this successful model. Let me address the necessity of keeping the government open. In the House, we have returned to regular order. We've been pressing this as a theme and a goal, and we have achieved that. We have made substantial progress on government funding this year. The House Appropriations Committee has passed all 12 bills out of committee. We have 3 passed off the floor already. We voted last week to begin a bipartisan conference committee with the Senate on 3 bills. That's Milcon, Ag, and Ledge Branch. And appropriators are actively engaged in ongoing bipartisan conversations to fund the government for FY26. So we have to allow time to do that because we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, as you all know. We need responsible options here to keep the government open while all this work continues. And Republicans are committed to making that happen. So here's what we'll do. We're going to release text here shortly, I think around noon, for a short-term, clean, continuing resolution that will keep the government funded and operating at current levels while we continue all this work and doing our jobs and getting the remaining bills done. Predictably and unfortunately, there are some Democrats who are openly pining for a government shutdown. In spite of this obvious and necessary step, they're grasping for straws as a party, and so some of them apparently believe that shutting down the government will be some sort of life raft for them so they can regain the support of the American people. I just think that is a fool's gambit. It's anybody who's advocating for that, it's to make it a partisan exercise is making a big mistake. In exchange for their vote to fund the government, some Democrats said they wanted Republicans to repeal our very popular and very effective reforms to the Medicaid program, where we cut fraud, waste, and abuse, and we ensured that illegal aliens don't receive taxpayer benefits, and we put able-bodied men back to work. They want us to wind that back. Zero chance that we will do that, because it's the right thing to do. And they're also demanding that we include unrelated health insurance tax credit provisions. That is a December policy issue, not a September funding issue. So this will not be a partisan CR. It will be a clean, short-term continuing resolution, end of story. And it's interesting to me that some of the same Democrats who decried government shutdowns under President Biden appear to have no heartache whatsoever at walking our nation off that cliff right now. I hope they don't. I hope that they'll work with us so we can all do our jobs here. We get a short-term CR done, complete the appropriations bill, and get back to the regular order that we have all seen as necessary so we can be good stewards of taxpayers' funds. With that, I'll take a few questions. Front row, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned Charlie Kirk being a champion of free speech. In that vein, there have been calls to go after organizations or people who have said things that are in light of that horrific tragedy. But I'm wondering from a legal perspective, what is the line when it comes to free speech? Is it, and Kim Bondi, addressed this in a podcast yesterday and kind of clarified it a little bit, but I'm curious from your perspective, what is the line when it comes to free speech?
Well, I mean, I approached this as a former litigator who defended free speech in the courts for a couple of decades. We defended religious freedom and speech that some people deemed to be inappropriate. Look, in America, it's a very important part of our tradition that we do not, this is a conservative principle, and certainly an American principle, we do not censor and silence disfavored viewpoints. People in America are allowed to say crazy things. Now, that said, if I'm an employer or I'm a government agency and I have someone in my employ who is online celebrating the heinous murder of an innocent person, a young husband and father, I can make the decision that they don't deserve to work for me. They shouldn't represent my company or my agency. And I have every right to do that, and I think that's appropriate. That's not the government censoring speech. That's personal behavior and decorum. And you have a right to enforce that. So I don't think it's a violation of core principles for people to have appropriate measures taken when they act like crazy people online. And that's up to the employers and these private businesses and these the people who make those decisions. That's not something that Congress is involved in. But I mean, I think all of that is intellectually consistent, and we'll continue to defend it.
Called on the political world to lower the temperature, cool down the rhetoric, and not use words like evil, enemy. The president himself has referred to Democrats oftentimes as evil, enemy. Would you urge him, would you advise him to tamp down the rhetoric?
The president has been called the most despicable names by people on the left for a long, long time. I don't have to give you the catalog. It would be this thick. I'd need one of those Hakeem Jeffries notebooks to put up here and go through with you with all that. Look, there's a lot of heated rhetoric all around, and what I'm trying to advance here is this idea that we can have vigorous policy debates. That is the legacy of Charlie Kirk. He loved the debate. But he didn't hate the people on the other side, and that's what I'm trying to encourage all of us to remember. We can have vehement disagreements on policy, but it shouldn't be personal. At the end of the day, we're trying to bring people to our mode of thinking, and it's more effective that way when you handle it that way. And I think Charlie was a great example of that. Yeah.
You said the anti-state subsidies is a December policy issue, not a September funding issue. Open enrollment begins November 1st. Should Americans be concerned that these will expire? Is there a commitment to kind of extend them at least a year? I mean,
they don't expire until the end of the year, and so we have until the end of December to figure all that out. I can tell you that there's real concern. I have concern. Republicans have concern about those policies. If you look at how much they've been abused in my estimation in some ways. There's no income cap on it. People make $600,000 a year, get a government subsidy for their health care. I don't think that that's going to be a popular measure when people understand how that works. There's a relatively small number of people that are affected by it, but that policy has real problems, and subsidizing that and making it a finance issue instead of a health care issue is a problem. So we have time to have that debate, and it's not something that should be involved in the government funding deadline by the end of September. That's the point. So thank you. Thank you.
Speaker Johnson and House Republican leaders gathered for their weekly press briefing, offering updates and reflections on both the recent tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk and the progress on legislative efforts to support American families and businesses. The session began with heartfelt condolences for the loss of Charlie Kirk, a prominent figure in conservative circles. Speaker Johnson and others expressed their grief, sending prayers to Kirk's wife, Erica, and their 2 children. Charlie's death, a result of a political assassination, has left a deep mark, especially among young conservatives, many of whom were inspired by his work. His legacy, they noted, would live on in the countless young people who had found direction through his advocacy. The vigils that took place across the country following his death were described as expressions of unity, love, and hope, offering a stark contrast to the violent responses seen in other instances. Shifting to legislative matters, Speaker Johnson highlighted the working families' tax cuts as a major achievement. These tax cuts were praised as the most pro-growth, pro-family reforms in American history. Specifically, the bill aims to bolster rural health care, small businesses, manufacturing, and energy production. One of the standout provisions is the $50 billion investment into rural health care, a move that was accelerated with the announcement that the Department of Health and Human Services had already opened a portal for people to apply for funding. The legislation is also designed to help small businesses by making permanent the 199A tax deduction, a provision that will benefit thousands of businesses across the country, particularly those in agriculture and small manufacturing. The tax cuts also provide significant relief for the average American worker. By eliminating taxes on tips, workers in industries like hospitality stand to see a noticeable increase in their take-home pay. The working families' tax cuts are designed to help individuals who make America's economy work, those in service, manufacturing, and small businesses. Speaker Johnson emphasized that these reforms would grow the American economy and enhance the prosperity of working families across the nation. Congressman Tony Weed, a former small business owner, spoke about the positive impact of the tax cuts on entrepreneurs. Weed shared his personal experience of running a small business and the struggles of dealing with government regulations and the challenges of inflation during the Biden administration. He expressed relief that the working families' tax cuts would finally offer small businesses in his district the support they need. He highlighted the permanence of the 199A tax deduction as a vital tool for small business owners, particularly for those in agriculture. California rancher Kevin Kester also shared how the tax cuts would benefit agriculture, a sector that often faces unique challenges. He pointed out the importance of the elimination of the death tax, which had previously threatened family-run ranches like his. The new provisions in the tax bill, such as permanent 100% bonus depreciation and funding for conservation programs, are designed to keep ranches viable and sustainable. Kester emphasized that these reforms would not only help businesses but also ensure that family-run operations could continue for future generations. Beyond the tax cuts, Speaker Johnson and his colleagues took time to address the issue of political violence, particularly in light of Charlie Kirk's assassination. They expressed the need for a shift in the political rhetoric of the nation, stressing that the use of extreme language and the vilification of political opponents had dangerous consequences. They argued that such rhetoric contributed to an environment where people who were already troubled could be spurred to violence. They noted the importance of responsible leadership in de-escalating tensions and fostering respectful political discourse. The speaker called for a return to debates based on policy, not personal attacks, and pointed out that leaders in all sectors, from politics to media, had a responsibility to avoid inciting violence through inflammatory language. The discussion then moved to the issue of crime in Washington, D.C., and the broader national concern about increasing violent crime. Speaker Johnson outlined several bills that House Republicans were pushing to curb the violence in the nation's capital, some of which were already aligned with President Trump's crime-fighting measures. These bills included the D.C. Crimes Act, which would prevent lenient sentencing reforms, and the D.C. Policing Protection Act, which would restore law enforcement's ability to pursue fleeing suspects. The bills also proposed reforms for juvenile sentencing, lowering the age for certain violent offenses to be tried as adults, and a Judicial Reform Act that would return the power of judicial appointments to the President and Senate, ensuring that activist judges could not let violent offenders back on the streets under the guise of restorative justice. Lastly, Speaker Johnson addressed the upcoming debate on government funding, emphasizing that Republicans were committed to keeping the government open and working for the American people. He reiterated that the House Appropriations Committee had made significant progress on passing bills and that a clean, short-term continuing resolution would soon be proposed to prevent a government shutdown. He also pointed out that while some Democrats were advocating for a shutdown, Republicans remained focused on ensuring government continuity and securing necessary funding for important issues, including health care and national defense. Throughout the briefing, Speaker Johnson underscored the importance of the work being done to support working families, improve public safety, and uphold the values that Charlie Kirk championed. He called on Americans to continue honoring Kirk's memory by embracing unity, compassion, and the free exchange of ideas.